we're going to get to a point where we have two nation states with money printers who are buying Bitcoin hand over fist, and that's when we're going to see some serious price action come to market. And this is where, when the price is doing what it's doing right now, you can have one major player basically buying the bid and doing this. But when there are two major players with money printers doing this, they can't hide. They will set a floor at whatever price they want to pay for Bitcoin, because when you think about it, they're purchasing a hard asset that cannot be duplicated with something they can literally print by holding down their finger on a computer.
So then what is Bitcoin's price at that point?
It's probably a 10,000x increase from here would be the expectation.
Bing bong. We are back with another edition of the State of Bitcoin podcast, where I've got the man, the myth, the legend, another recurring guest in the house, Peter Dunworth from the Bitcoin Advisor. But Peter, I had to get you on because, I mean, what? Do we just hang it up now at this point? We crashed to 60,000. Now the 58K gang is coming back in and it looks like everything's over. So are we just being advised to just pack it up and go home, or what, man?
That's what the bears are telling us, right? It's all over for Bitcoin. It's dead again. The 400 or 500, fifth hundred obituary that we're reading about Bitcoin. Sadly, I don't think it's that easy. And this last couple of weeks with Bitcoin and the relentless selling pressure we've seen, I think has been really taxing on a lot of Bitcoiners. And that fearful 58K gang looks like it's within sights, and we might be there sooner than we know.
Yeah. So, I mean, what do you think that the reason for this giant sell off is? Because the narrative previously, like, I mean, maybe a month or two ago, which honestly feels like ages ago, was that the whales were selling off, but there was a lot of institutional buy pressure. So Bitcoin didn't fall as much as it would have, or potentially should have, if we didn't have as much of the institutions buying up as they were. So now we're having that big giant sell off. And, before, the narrative was like, oh, we'll never see another, 50-60% drop in Bitcoin. But it seems like we're getting it now. So what are you seeing out there? And what do you think the reasoning for this giant dip is?
Boy, that's a deep question. And I think if I look at how did we get here, I think you can pinpoint that exact moment to the 10th of the 10th with the Binance meltdown and that malfunction or undermining of the market makers that happened there. Typically, it takes probably 3 to 6 months for dead bodies to float to the surface, and that's been the narrative that everyone has run with. But that's not what's brought us to this point in time. I think that has helped, and it's never just one thing. It's always a confluence of a whole host of things. And I look at that might have been what got the party started in this bear market, but as the price drops, it creates a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There's a lot of people who bought Bitcoin with the promise of getting rich very quickly, and they just didn't. The material gains didn't realize, so they've basically back to not really understanding what they own. And the problem with that is that if you don't understand what you own, you get very fearful when it drops 30, 40, 50%. And then at the very point in time when you should be buying more and allocating heavier to this investment, you end up selling it. And this is where the real compounded losses add up, that people don't know what they own. They don't, or didn't really understand what they were getting when they bought it. And then when it drops, it doesn't live up to the promise of instant riches. And truth be told, Bitcoin is probably the hardest investment to hold, because not only does it go up dramatically, it also can come crashing down very quickly. But if you're invested for the long term, the fundamental thesis of Bitcoin hasn't changed. And I look at this as just an enormous buying opportunity that we only get to see maybe once every 4 years.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing, I've been doing some digging here lately, is that if you look at like the wallet distribution in Bitcoin, it is very similar to traditional wealth. And last time when we dipped under 100K, we saw the number of wallets with 10 million sats or zero point 0.1 Bitcoin drop, while the number of institutions with 1,000 or more Bitcoin really shoot up. So, do you think that this is ever going to, I guess, change human behavior? Are we ever going to unlock it where we just see Bitcoin and that changes how we react and not sell off in emotional moments like this? Or is this just, I guess, how things are always going to play out?
You mean that the question is, can we reprogram that reptilian brain that's been millions and millions of years of evolution that basically
Exactly.
teaches exactly how not to behave in volatile markets? Can we unwind that in a matter of 4 years and teach everyone on Earth? Sadly, I think that's a very tall ask. We're not going to be able to achieve that, but we can educate ourselves. And I think the one of the great gifts that you deliver to the Bitcoin community is knowledge, expertise, and understanding that hopefully, with some of the discussions that we have and your other guests, people get to educate themselves about what this is and then protect themselves from making bad decisions at precisely the wrong time. And this is where I think for anyone who's thinking about selling, a great mate of both of ours, I was catching up with yesterday, Checkmatey, he said what I was thinking and probably what you're thinking, which is now is precisely the wrong time to be selling. And there's going to be a lot of people out there who just cannot deal with the emotional pain of watching this thing go down any further and want it to stop, and they'll sell. And then once everyone's done that, the market's free to move back up.
Yeah, so taking that a step further, right? What is going on in the precious metals market, and how do you think that this could potentially relate to Bitcoin here going forward? Because I think I'm seeing the silver short squeezes, all of these different narratives floating out about what's going on in the precious metals market, and a lot of Bitcoiners did come over from the, hard money principles of whether it was being gold bugs or just kind of understanding that aspect. And they've moved everything from gold to Bitcoin. And now they're like, what the hell happened? So, what are you seeing in this precious metals market? And do you think that some of that capital is going to flow over to Bitcoin here eventually? And it's just maybe gold and Peter Schiff is having their day in the sun, their one day in the sun for the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years or so.
I agree with that. I think I don't want to take anything away from the gold bugs and silver bugs. They've been at this a lot longer than the Bitcoiners have when it comes to a sound money standard. And I think we should all be on the same team. We literally are all on the same team of sound money. And so I think this infighting is just we haven't been able to articulate the position of Bitcoin correctly at this point in time. But if you look at what's happening in the gold and precious metals markets, we've seen in the last 2 weeks, we've seen effectively a huge blow off top. We've had a parabola, a chart that looks a lot like what a blow off top in Bitcoin looks like. That happened in both gold and silver markets. And then that was basically followed by a large crash in dollar terms, which is probably 2 or 3 times the entire market size or market cap of Bitcoin. And I look at that and think this volatility is here to stay. And probably reference the Weimar chart of the 1920s and the gold price to the Weimar. And not only is it volatile to the upside, but it comes exceptionally volatile to the downside. And this is where I think gold and silver were both overbought on any of the momentum indicators that you look at. It's not possible to maintain a vertical chart. There needs to be some rest in order for the market to recuperate, recover, and then go again. So this is perfectly normal market behaviour in the short term. And in the long term, I think the case for gold over the next few years and silver is very positive. And where I'm very positive on the gold and silver thesis, and I don't think it is in any way competition to Bitcoin. I actually think 1 on 1 makes 3 when it comes to the gold silver hard money thesis with respect to Bitcoin, because the larger those market caps go, the more opportunity there is for Bitcoin. And I firmly believe that Bitcoin is a 10x, maybe a 100x better asset than gold by way of market cap. So I think as Bitcoiners, we should be rooting for gold to be at 25,000 an ounce or 50,000 an ounce, whatever the number, the bigger the better, because not only will through time Bitcoin achieve that market cap, but it will surpass it by a factor of probably 10, 20, 30, 40, maybe even 100x bigger than the gold market. But it's such a nascent technology, Bitcoin, and it's so misunderstood. And there's a lot of education that goes into really understanding this asset, and it takes time. I just look at my personal journey on this, and it took me 5 years to really understand it and buy Bitcoin before I actually bought some. Having been told by my brother to buy it when it was $3, I share that experience because it's the most costly financial mistake of my life. But in moments like this, a lot of people don't really understand the total addressable market for Bitcoin, that there is huge upside to it. And working with the I guess the precious metal guys, gold and silver market, it is only beneficial for Bitcoin because at some point in time in the future, Bitcoin will not only reach those levels, but it'll surpass them dramatically. So I'm happy to see the gold bugs and silver bugs getting a bit on their assets, and long may it live.
Yeah, so I guess obviously we've had a few conversations in the past about Bitcoin going extremely parabolic. Does this help? I guess help you with that theory? Just because I mean, it seems like there's essentially two different I guess theories when it comes to Bitcoin price. There's that power law model that the returns are going to be diminishing. With that, they said there wasn't going to be as much downside risk, but there wasn't going to be as much upside risk. But now that I'm seeing the volatility in the silver market for how much more or how much bigger of a market cap that is, I mean, it's essentially it's more than double Bitcoin's market cap now, and we saw a 30% dip in one day from silver. So does this kind of, I guess, almost justify, or you think help confirm your previous thesis of potentially going parabolic at some point and seeing things like really take off?
To me, I think it confirms the parabolic nature of these assets. And watching the price action of gold and silver over the last week or two, it really confirms to me the notion that most people misunderstand the fact that price is determined at the margin. So, depending on what is available for sale, is really going to be determined by what is the price. And if you look at the gold and silver markets, they're precious metals. They're required in some way, shape, or form for some industry, but not really. There's a huge monetary premium to them, although that monetary premium's been eaten away by industrial use cases for silver. But the price is determined at the margin. And this is where, when you have absolute digital scarcity in Bitcoin, only 21 million, you've got a maniac, and I say that in the best possible way, in Saylor, buying as much Bitcoin as he can. He's the first and only major corporate to this party. He's got 3% of supply. What happens when we have nation state competition for this? And what happens when there's no physical Bitcoin or digital Bitcoin to deliver and it's all paper contracts? What we end up seeing is what happened in March 2022 in the nickel market. We saw a number of traders basically put a position on nickel, and it sent the price of nickel up 300 to 400% in a day. And I look at this and think nickel is a fairly innocuous metal. It's not rare by any means whatsoever. You can mine more of it. And what happened there is it effectively risked blowing up the London Metals Exchange, and meant that the LME, London Metals Exchange, had to step in and basically make good on some of their market participants until the people who benefited from that trade, that they're not entitled to the profits that they thought they were, and they're only going to get 40 cents in the dollar on the profit. Now, if they had been able to get the profit, that would have near bankrupted some of the other market participants. Now, for me, all I'm looking at with this gold and silver market is that price is determined at the margin. That's what every Bitcoiner needs to remember. And if we want to make sure and hold these banks accountable for paying what they have to when it comes to Bitcoin, it's absolutely imperative that every Bitcoiner out there self custodies their Bitcoin so that there is no supply available for the banks to manipulate.
Yeah, and what is interesting too is that I think I saw somewhere that there's like 356 paper ounces of silver for every physical ounce of silver. So with a market that there is so much like paper silver just out there, it's still getting manipulated this much. So if you have your Bitcoin in self custody, even with silver being 2 to 3x the size of Bitcoin, look at how volatile is this going. I mean, I feel like this is just getting me more bullish, seeing how volatile this market is. But what do you think that this points to as far as like the uncertainty in the market? Because obviously we've had a lot of, I guess let's call it like geopolitical meandering back and forth, right? And then we've also had Trump announce a new Fed chair pick, and in all that, we saw massive swings. So, do you think that this is just, I guess, a symptom of the massive amounts of money printing that we've been seeing? That the markets are so forward looking that and there's just so much money out there that it just swings like this, or what else could be I guess a possible explanation that you see for the reason why we're seeing so much volatility in the markets right now?
I think there's a lot of reasons for this uncertainty. And I think when there are huge opportunities, there's also huge uncertainty. We're looking at AI and the disruption that AI brings. That potentially completely reroutes what we know as efficient or positive businesses. For me, I think we have a number of headwinds that we've got to get through that aren't going to be around for much longer, but my expectation is for the next 2 to 3 weeks, well, actually, probably 5 to 6 weeks till the end of March, the end of the first quarter. We're going to have a whole host of things weighing over the market. And that, not only in the Bitcoin market, but that in the broader market, is a symptom of what we're facing at the moment with an unknown new Fed chair. I know we've got some short odds on who'll be the favourite to win that, but how are they going to deal with it? What are they going to do? But if we can zoom out a little bit and have a look at what's happening this year geopolitically, because I think that's the most important factor in what we've got and what's going to influence not only markets but specifically the Bitcoin price. We've got the US midterms coming up in November this year, and what I think is probably one of the truest things I've seen from my experience, and love the American culture, but as an outsider looking in to the US, I look at this and think, what is one thing that the US love more than anything else? To me, that's a comeback story. And so I look at this and I think, in an election year or midterm year, what a great story. Have the market crash into the first quarter, appoint your man, get the Fed rolling, and all of a sudden you rip back from April through to September, October, back to all-time highs, and you set yourself up for a very positive election season when it comes to the midterms. Because at the moment, the Republicans look unelectable at this point in time. They'll face a landslide. So if the mood is dark, there's a high probability the Republicans will lose. But if the economy rips back, everything's humming, manufacturing starts motoring along, that reshoring that's been talked of, we're going to see a very positive outlook for the US economy. And I think that bodes well for the Republicans and their chances of re-election.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I think that is kind of almost seems like it's going to be too good to be true, right? Because the new Fed chair will be coming in May. They're more than likely going to do what Trump wants and pump some more liquidity in the market, which in turn will theoretically go to Bitcoin, and we'll start to see a pump, which will be coincidentally right around the time where these midterms will come up. It seems like it would be too good to be true. And I'm going to play devil's advocate with you here, Peter, because it seems like every time we think something is going to happen in Bitcoin, the opposite has been happening lately. Is that because traditional finance is here and it's essentially they've, I guess, financialized Bitcoin in a sense, even though, well, we could make the argument Bitcoin, it's Bitcoinizing finance. But do you think that, I guess it's almost like a symptom of what we saw with like the real estate market in 2008 is like when you start financializing some of these products or assets, so to speak, that the volatility is just unavoidable?
You raise a really good point, and this is where TradFi is a big world. In some respects, yes, totally agree with you on that. If you look at, say, the options market, futures, derivatives, those types of markets are having an outsized impact on Bitcoin through paper Bitcoin. But if you look at, and this will be controversial, so to all the Bitcoiners out there, don't throw tomatoes at me on this one. It's just hyperbolically speaking. Um, you look at the ETFs and the flows in and out of it, they have been very strong. And despite the price dropping below the median price of purchase at 82,000, those ETF holders have actually been quite strong handed, diamond hands when it comes to not selling. They haven't sold a huge amount. yes, there's been a little bit of outflow, but their median price is 82. We're sitting at 62 or 63K as we speak. And there hasn't been a huge amount of outflow. I think there's been only 6% of total outflows from what went in. So I look at that and I think that there's that bifurcation of that TradFi market that ETF holders have actually been very good for Bitcoin. They haven't really sold off in a huge amount any more than, say, retail investors in the spot Bitcoin. So um, there is some nuance to that question, and I hope that's gone part way to answering it.
No, I mean, I think it is interesting too, because if you look at the ETF outflows, it just simply that they're not selling. So it is kind of this different kind of buyer in. And I guess that almost relates back to the question I asked you earlier about, just the self custody guys and everybody holding Bitcoin essentially selling off during these dips. So is this just I guess the natural progression in this cycle? And do you think that the 4-year cycle narrative now is essentially over?
Damn, I was a big, having seen the year close negative, I thought, oh, yes, we've slayed that demon of the 4 year cycle. It's over. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And then I just think of that meme with the Grim Reaper going door to door about 4 year cycles and then the 4 year cycle popping out and just killing the Grim Reaper. All of a sudden, 4 year cycles are back on the table and it's revolving around the halving again. And statistically, that doesn't make any sense when the halving of supply every 4 years um, is such a minuscule event now in proportionate terms. You're having inflation go from 2% to 1% is not a big deal, but when inflation goes from 50% to 25%, it's a huge deal. Um, I think there are other factors in the market now that make it very different. Institutional money, geopolitics is playing its hand in it. TradFi's got a much bigger influence. And I'd like to say the 4 year cycle's not dead, but here we are down 40, 50% and looking to go lower.
Yeah, it almost seems like it's come roaring back, man. And I thought too, like, I mean, like I said, I was almost buying into the narrative where we wouldn't have as big of these dips because we're getting those stronger hands that are essentially, the institutions, the governments, and all of these people, I mean, we were saying, we're lying out the ETF buyers. Like, these are the guys that are like buying this asset for long term. But then, like I said, you think you know what's going to go on and happen with Bitcoin. It comes and smacks you right in the face. And then we get back down to maybe that 58K gang, and we're going to see prices maybe potentially touching down there. So, with this price action where it is, how do you project, the rest of this year to come on? I mean, we're recording this on February 5th, and I think everybody thought 2025 was going to be a little bit different. But now going into 2026, it seems like everybody and the sentiment around Bitcoin is honestly the most negative I've seen it since I've been in the space. So, how are you feeling about it, and where do you think it's going? What if I told you never had to sell your Bitcoin? Instead, you can borrow against it with Salt Lending. Why give up your hard earned Bitcoin when you can unlock its value without letting it go? With Salt, you get secure Bitcoin collateralized loans with no credit checks, no prepayment fees, and best of all, no rehypothecation. Salt has had zero customer collateral losses since it launched. Salt was the first platform to offer Bitcoin collateralized loans starting way back in 2016. Today, they offer tailored options for both individuals and businesses. And now introducing Salt Shield, the no liquidation solution. No forced liquidations during the lifetime of your loan when you're enrolled with Salt Shield. This just launched at the Bitcoin conference in Las Vegas, and it is next level peace of mind. For Green Candle listeners only, head to saltlending.com/green-candle for this exclusive offer for your Bitcoin collateralized loan. You can get cash for your Bitcoin today. Salt Lending, secure, trusted, proven.
I think I agree with you on the sentiment being the worst I've seen it. And I mean, I've only been around since 2016. So lived through 2018, lived through 2022, lived through FTX, lived through China banning Bitcoin mining. I've got to say it is the worst I've seen. And I think that is because we have the reflection on other assets that have been doing really well. So it feels a lot worse to Bitcoiners than what previous cycles were, because in previous cycles you had a huge parabolic blow off top. You got to take your winnings, and if it crashed 80%, no big deal. But when you barely, in inflation adjusted terms, beat your previous all time high, and then you drop 60 to 80% while other assets like gold are ripping 20% in a week, it feels really bad. And this is where I think it's really important to be patient and put things into perspective. This is the first time it's happened, and it's really important to zoom out and have a look at why do you own the asset that you own. And this is the important thing of understanding what you own when it comes to Bitcoin. Bitcoin in self custody, not in the ETFs or other paper derivatives, is an absolute godsend. It's the most powerful tool, or most powerful monetary tool that you can hold and wield. You've got full autonomy, full self sovereignty. You have censorship and seizure resistant money. And in a world that's going into possibly the fourth turning, which is looking very likely at this point in time, that kind of money will have a premium on it. And at the moment, we just have a huge discount on that because I don't think people really understand what this asset is. But again, when people really understand the benefits and the power that Bitcoin delivers you from a personal sovereignty perspective, this will be a multi-million, if not multi-billion-dollar asset.
Now let's dive into the fourth turning. For those who are unfamiliar of that, why don't you describe that theory a little bit, and why do you think, it seems like we're trending in that direction?
Well, the fourth turning basically describes a series of events that lead to the culmination of a breakdown in society in a very meaningful way, where um, there are periods in time where society grows, society prospers, um, the prosperity of a society leads to poor decision making, and then the poor decision making ultimately leads to some very bad decisions and the destruction of the institutions that were there previously. And this has downstream consequences on all of those market participants and citizens involved in it. And the TLDR of fourth turning is it's basically a revolution. It's burning things to the ground and then rebuilding from the start. And when you look around the world, we are seeing the formations of that across the globe. There is, I think, huge political instability in parts of the US. You have a look through Europe, you've got Macron basically banning Marine Le Pen from entering the presidential race in France. You've got the EU stepping in to push a whole host of personal agendas in nation states that have a difference of opinion with Brussels, which looks like cause for revolt. And in the UK, which is basically the what a lot of Western society's got to be grateful for, you look at a whole host of those institutions that are rotten to the core. Corruption is absolutely rampant all the way to the top of the political structure. Not only all of their institutions, it looks like their judges are running a two-tier justice system. And this is the problem, that if that doesn't get rectified and the people understand what the rules are and the rules are evenly applied to everyone, then the citizens basically have a huge revolt and burn the place down. And this is where, in that type of situation, the one thing that you want to be holding, I believe, is not gold, is not silver, and it's probably not Bitcoin in that period. You want to be having lead and guns full of it. So, without wanting to be too dark on this, we're getting much closer to that as a society across the Western world. And this is at the same time when we've got Russia doing its thing, China asserting itself as a global dominant player. And at the same time, it's questionable, and I don't think we're there yet, but a lot of people around the world want to start questioning the power of the US. And this is where things start to break and get very interesting very quickly.
Yeah, it seems like we're kind of trending in that direction, and I want to dive in because obviously you have a close connection with with Australia, being from there, and it seems like they've kind of taken a turn for the worse, and the EU is right there with them. But it does seem like a lot of people are starting to, I guess, quote unquote, vote with their feet and get out and leave. Do you think that, I guess, we're at a stage where I guess people are able to take their wealth and leave out of these jurisdictions. And when you see the freezing of bank accounts, the digital IDs, all of these, negative and almost like Orwellian type of tactics that these governments are using to control, you know, do you think that people are just essentially going to bend over and take it at this point, or do you have some hope that some powers that be are going to stop these things from developing as rapidly as they seem to be right now?
I hope I'm wrong, but history would suggest that when rights are taken, they don't hand them back. You have to physically fight for them. And this is the very sad thing. You look at the exodus of millionaires. I think there were 12 or 13,000 millionaires that left the UK for greener pastures, Dubai being the recipient of most of those. And I think as our governments understand that they are out of cash, they don't have the ability to generate revenue, they've got a bloated government that basically has, and if I can just have a rant for 1 second, a side note here is, government economics and how they portray their input into the national economy always beggars belief for me, in that they can talk about government spending adding to GDP. And to me, I'm thinking, you've taken someone's tax dollars and then you've spent them and you're claiming that as GDP that you've created. And we're getting to a tipping point now, I think, in a lot of the Western cultures where there are so many people on the government teat that it tips over to the point where the the working class are basically being taxed to death. And so if you look at in Australia, you look at the UK, the highest taxpayers are probably walking away with 40% or less of the income that they generate. And that to me doesn't seem fair when you've got a huge welfare state blowing out and there's runaway spending in that capacity. I think anyone who's in a position to move will end up moving to escape that. So it's really just have a look at the incentives, and that will tell you everything that's going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the more craziness we're starting to see globally, I mean, the more that they're essentially just making the case for Bitcoin. But when we see essentially, I mean, you were saying a little bit earlier, it might not be the best to have gold, silver, or Bitcoin in like the craziness of this fourth turning. Maybe you need something like lead. Obviously, we don't want to get too grim and get down that rabbit hole. But when we're lining out how the societies have just basically been taking a turn, it seems like still in a time like this, the biggest orange pillar is going to be price. So how can we, I guess, reach more Bitcoin? Because I mean, it seems like the price is always the longest standing. I guess it's unique because Bitcoin's price is essentially that just the key indicator for adoption in a sense. So it seems like with the liquidity being sucked out of the market and the sentiment being down and this fourth turning ahead of us, it seems very, very grim here. But how do we turn more people towards Bitcoin here, Peter? How do we get them back? Is it going to take something like the Fed coming in and cutting interest rates and pumping a bunch of liquidity and thus Bitcoin price pumping? Or is there another way that we could get them over? Last bull run, we had exchanges blow up. You saw FTX, Celsius, BlockFi, you name it. But the true power of Bitcoin is getting it off an exchange into cold storage. This bull run, I'm trusting Trezor, the company that's been around for over a decade, and they just had a brand new release of the best hardware wallet in the game, the Trezor Safe 7. It's got the first audible secure element. No other hardware wallet has this. On top of it, I travel a lot, so I need an easy way to connect my Bitcoin hardware wallet to my laptop, phone, what have you. Therefore, it is the easiest way and has the best connectivity to access your Bitcoin. This is truly how you become your own bank, and the best way to do that is with a Trezor Safe 7. So you could go to the affiliate link down below and get yourself one right now, and do it quickly because they are flying off the shelves, folks. So do it with the easiest and best way to get your Bitcoin off exchanges. So go to the affiliate link down below, get yourself a Trezor Safe 7, and get your Bitcoin off exchanges in the easiest way possible. All right, enough from me. Let's get back to the show.
I think there are a number of ways for us to help people understand Bitcoin. Um, the first way is to actually get them to get some and use it. And once they use it, once they see it, they'll understand what that benefit is. But when you're looking to invest, it's always a relative decision. I.e., what's the opportunity cost of investing in this versus something else? And when Bitcoin price is off 40 or 50%, and we've got a whole host of measures that are wildly positive for Bitcoin, I look at this and think, this is precisely the moment that people should be looking at Bitcoin, because herein lies the opportunity. It won't be at a 50% discount for too long. It will recover through time. And by time, I mean literally over the next few months to 6 months. We'll be through this bear market. This pain that we're all going through at this point in time in the day will look like a distant memory. And then we'll all start with the memes of, oh, I'm not going to buy Bitcoin at 120K. I'm going to wait for it to go to 50K again. And this is the problem with Bitcoin, in that because it's the wildest, most volatile asset that we've had, it plays havoc on your emotions and your emotional IQ when it comes to, or your EQ when it comes to investing. So in typical markets, they might sell off 20%, and that's considered a huge blow. Considered a bear market in stocks, and then people start to look to add positions there. But Bitcoin is more than double that. It's nearly triple that, the volatility of the stock market, maybe more. And that really plays havoc. But herein lies the opportunity, if you're brave, if you're curious, to add or start a position in Bitcoin at this point in time and have that build through time. And if I look around at what the alternative is for what you can invest in at this point in time, the stock market looks fully priced to me. Bonds are uninvestable when it comes to the inflation rate and the debasement. And I think, bonds would have to be paying over 15% per annum in order for me to get excited and wanting to put money to work there. And that would have to be a net 15%, not a gross 15%. So the chances of that happening anytime soon are, well, let's hope not, not really possible. And then you look at the property market in the US, UK, Australia, Canada, New Zealand, property's cooked. It's really, really hard to make money in property. The notion and the promise that we're all delivered, or that we're all told around property, just buy property, get on the property ladder, and then buy your next one, the next one. I think that social contract is broken when it comes to property. So I look at, for everyone who's thinking about Bitcoin, why don't you actually study the other alternative investment options that you've got, and then come back to Bitcoin, realizing how limited the opportunities are in every other asset class. And I'm still confident that over the next 10 years, we're going to see somewhere between a 50 to 100x return in Bitcoin over the next 10 years. And those type of returns is something that you just don't get in any other asset.
Yeah, and I think it is going to be something where we start to see it go parabolic, and then, like we were lining out earlier, I mean, the silver market just proves that this is like full fledged possibility here in the near future. And when we see the development of how this space is, I guess, playing out with the institutions coming in, and the potential governments. We also had your friend Checkmatey, also a friend of the program here. Last time he was on, he was telling me that there's some big governments buying up Bitcoin, and there has to be some multiple of these big players doing this. Do you still think that that is happening, and that maybe there's some fishiness going on in the back end, or maybe it's, who knows, maybe the guys over at BlackRock, or maybe some of these governments trying to dump in order to try to accumulate lower, or something along those lines? Do you think that there is some sort of price manipulation going on right now?
It's always a boogeyman when we're in a bear market.
Yes, exactly. I have to point to
we,
somebody,
we,
Peter.
we
I
need
have
to
to.
find someone. Who are we going to blame for our
I
misery
know,
right now? Who on earth
exactly.
can take this? Who is responsible? Let's find them and lynch them. Um, I say that jokingly because it is always the way, and nine
Always.
times out of ten,
I
it's never that. It's just markets acting in unison. Basically mass hysteria, people acting literally at the same point in time. What we're seeing in the market, where Bitcoin's off 11, 12, 13% in a day. What you've got is just a confluence of mass hysteria where people are acting individually, running to the doors for exit, and creating what looks to be a coordinated conspiracy to send the price of Bitcoin lower. But it's never a conspiracy on the way up. It's always, oh, this is what market demand meeting supply looks like. So I say that facetiously. I don't think there is anything untoward there. I think what we will find at some point in time in the future is we're going to get to a point where we have two nation states with money printers who are buying Bitcoin hand over fist. And that's when we're going to see some serious price action come to market. And this is where, when the price is doing what it's doing right now, you can have one major player basically buying the bid and doing this. But when there are two major players with money printers doing this, they can't hide. They will set a floor at whatever price they want to pay for Bitcoin. Because when you think about it, they're purchasing a hard asset that cannot be, I guess, duplicated with something they can literally print by holding down their finger on a computer. Once this realization dawns on people, we're going to have a nation state competition for Bitcoin, and price will literally become irrelevant then.
Do you think because I mean Kevin Warsh, obviously he is the nomination for the new Fed chair. So whether or not that comes true, I guess time will tell. But he has been on record saying very, very positive things about Bitcoin, but also on record, which kind of sent the markets in a tizzy here, of being very hawkish and not wanting to lower rates to help make sure that we're fighting inflation. But obviously he's Trump's guy. He's probably going to come in and conduct QE. Do you think that this nomination, or this, could be hinting towards potentially the U.S. printing money in a sense with QE and buying Bitcoin here in the next few months?
I think it's going to be whatever is in the best interest of the US. And I think he is really Besant's guy. And so he and Besant are going to have to work really closely together. And I look at the influence that Stan Druckenmiller's had on the market, where Besant worked for Druckenmiller. It looks like the new Fed chair will have worked for him as well. Those guys understand both sides of the fence when it comes to government politic and real world application to it. So yes, he may look hawkish, but a hawkish environment should actually be very positive for Bitcoin, because if you look at the second order consequences of what a hawkish Fed looks like, that means they're going to want to reshore the balance sheet. They're going to want to recapitalize the financial markets. And I look at what is the fastest way to recapitalize the financial markets that we have, and that is Bitcoin, because you can't use property to do it because we've got a cost of living crisis. You can't use the stock market to inflate because you're already running at a 20 to 30 times price earnings multiple. By definition, you can't print more money because that only adds to the problem, it doesn't solve it. And so the alternative is you pump Bitcoin, you send that thing to $1 million or $10 million a coin, you make a very small number of cypherpunks and nerds very, very wealthy, and you avoid economic collapse. To me, a hawkish Fed on the face of it looks really bad for Bitcoin, but long term, I actually think it's very, very good for Bitcoin, because he'll want to make sure that the debt crisis, or the debt problem that we've got at the moment, is that they solve the collateral crisis that accompanies that. And this is where I haven't seen anyone talking about the collateral crisis. Everyone wants to harp on about, oh, we've got a debt problem, debt problem. Debt is only a problem if you have no collateral to take to recover your debt. And so the debt's only a problem because there's no collateral. And I look at this and think Bitcoin is the ideal asset to recapitalize the financial markets and have as the collateral for the world, because it's globally ubiquitous. There's no downstream consequences for Main Street. If the price goes to 10 million tomorrow, it's not going to affect inflation. It's not going to affect housing affordability. It's not going to affect the cost of living crisis. It's going to be a net benefit to society, and it solves a huge problem that we have, which is there's no collateral in the system. We're effectively insolvent.
Yeah. So then, will this, I guess, Bitcoin help prop up the fiat system to a point where it won't fail? You think, because it'll help with this collateral crisis that we're in?
I think it can. It just needs to grow into an unimaginable size in order to deliver that, because there's still going to be volatility, but you just need Bitcoin to grow into a size where it is so huge it accounts for, realistically, probably 70, 80, 90% of all assets in the world will be denominated or will revolve around Bitcoin. And so the housing market, the bond market, the stock market will be probably maybe 10% of the size of the total Bitcoin market. And that's what makes sense to me.
This bull run, I'm looking for ways to stack Bitcoin in my sleep, and mining has always caught my eye. I've partnered with the guys over at Simple Mining to help you do just that. I don't recommend anything that I don't use personally, so I've got a machine up and running with them right this second. And they've even opened the facility up so anyone can go and visit. They manage over 15,000 machines for 500 clients, handling all of the maintenance and repairs so you don't have to. And for the Green Candle listeners, they're giving an exclusive offer, all the repairs for the first year for free. So if you've been thinking about mining, head on over to simplemining.io/greencandle to get this exclusive offer and learn about the potential tax benefits that you can get from mining with Simple Mining. All right, enough from me. Let's get back to the show. So then what is Bitcoin's price at that point? That's like, maybe $1 trillion coin.
It's probably a 10,000 X increase from here, would be the expectation.
My goodness. Well, okay.
I'm
Well,
not fast
there
with
we
the
go.
numbers to tell you exactly what that is. I know it just needs to go up a lot. And this is where, for anyone looking at the investments that are out there, when you realize that, hey, yeah, there's limited upside with property, limited upside with stocks, limited upside with bonds. They're almost uninvestable. The commodities markets just had a blow off top like we haven't seen in 30 years or more. Um, all of a sudden, Bitcoin looks really good at a 50% discount to where it was 3 months ago.
Yeah, I mean, well, at the end of the day, right? I mean, Bitcoin is going to absorb a lot of these markets, and I mean, we've heard Saylor kind of talk about the $300 trillion bond market, the $145 trillion fixed income market. I think since the last time you've come on, he's brought up the $200 trillion credit market. Obviously, there's people building products to help take in some of that real estate market. Now, watching all of these and looking at all of these different markets, I mean, they're huge numbers. Do you think how quickly do you think Bitcoin will start to swallow up some of these markets? Do you think it's going to be slower than we expect, or do you think like hey, we're going to turn around and you're going to be like, what the hell just happened? How did we get to Bitcoin from crashing and burning to 50,000 to all of a sudden 1 million a coin here?
If I can use a historical example, which I think is the
Yes.
closest thing we have to it, I look at the work that Larry Fink did in the early 80s building out that mortgage backed security market. That market was built to tokenize the US housing market. It was to financialize, tokenize it, whatever you want to call it. And that took Larry the better part of 20 years to really financialize that and have that totally ingratiated into the traditional financial system, starting from zero. Bitcoin's 17 years old, and we're only 2 years into the ETFs. So all of a sudden, we're just over 2 years into the ETFs. I think we've got another 10 to 15 years before it gets to the size where it's a meaningful component of the broader financial system and ingratiating itself into that lead role as pristine collateral. There's a lot of education that needs to take place between now and then, but I look at this as a way of solving a real issue because the alternative to solving this collateral crisis that we've got is we basically have a war and then we have a debt jubilee at the end of it. And truth be told, I've seen enough killing in the Ukraine and Russia that I don't want to see young men go to war for old men's fights when we have a solution that can solve that problem peacefully. And the only side effect of it is you just make a few people really rich.
And those few people are the Bitcoin OG whales.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, would it be the worst thing in the world, huh? I mean, I wish I was an OG whale, but hey, I don't think it would be, necessarily like I said, the worst possible aspect of this. But if we don't solve this collateral crisis, if let's say we're playing on the other side of things, if they don't see Bitcoin as the pristine collateral, right? I mean, because I think there is that risk that as Bitcoiners we're starting to see with the governments not really embracing Bitcoin as fast as maybe we thought, right? I mean, the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, there was no buys. There's the Genius Act that passed essentially just to get stablecoins to buy up all the UST bills. I mean, it seems like the US is still using a lot of, let's say, crypto products to try to prop up its own dollar and pay its own debt. Now, what is it going to take? Like, are we going to get into that debt spiral that James Lavish and Lynn Alden have essentially been talking about for quite some time before we can solve this collateral crisis?
Very possibly we could, and this is where like two great names in the industry. I absolutely love James's work and think
Hmm.
he's one of the best, and Lynn is an all-time great who I've learnt so much from. So I'd prefer not to be put on the spot about disagreeing with them, if that's okay. I think
Yeah.
I think they'll be proven right. However, there is a scenario where there could be a situation where the debt isn't a major problem, and if we bring this back to what I see the use cases being for Bitcoin as a store of value, medium of exchange, and unit of account, we have a burgeoning technology that is just in its very infancy in the AI economy that's kicking off. And we saw last week some of the work that Marty Bent's done talking about AI and what currency systems, what payment systems they want to use. It's all going to revolve around Bitcoin. The interesting thing about that is that the collateral crisis is really a store of value problem that we're solving for, and maybe a unit of account. But this AI economy has the ability to be exponentially larger than our existing economy. And if the AI infrastructure and ecosystem agrees that Bitcoin is the only way they want payment made, that's going to take care of itself as far as value accretion goes. So the need for solving the collateral crisis won't really be a big issue. And to sort of put a bow on this, you will effectively solve this problem by growing out of it. So the debt will become meaningless relative to the productivity gains that you have. And we've seen Elon Musk talk about Trump talking about a 6 to 8% GDP growth in the next year. I thought that was wild, totally unachievable. And then we see a number with a five handle in front of it. And now I'm starting to believe. By the way, I'll just make one quick side note: never bet against America. Um, that's the most important thing you can see. So if that happens, Trump's talking about a 6 to 8% GDP. Elon's talking about, well, we could get double digits, which is over 10, and in the next few years we could get triple digits, which is 100% GDP growth. Um, this sounds completely fanciful, but I've learned to never bet against America and never doubt the richest man in the world and what he can achieve, because he's got a track record of proving everyone wrong.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you're lining this out, with as an Aussie here, because I always kind of resonated with that, right? Never bet against America because we have just some of the greatest entrepreneurs and growing out of this. But to be honest, before these past like 2 weeks or so, I wasn't the biggest. I mean, I've used AI for a while, but the developments that are happening right now are some of the most crazy things that I've ever seen. And I think, we're seeing the markets kind of scream at it that software companies are essentially dying down. And any company, like, maybe we see this AI boom. And I've been in the theory that we've almost been in this bubble. But I actually think that there is a chance that we build this way out now with the developments of like Claudebot and all of these different things, where I'm actually pretty optimistic that there is a greener pastures here. Do you see it as the potential of having that AI bubble? Because it seems like everybody's been screaming about it for years, but like with this recent development, I mean, you mentioned Marty, him lining out on how he's using Claudebot and all of these different things. Like, is there a possibility that you know this growing out goes so quickly that eventually AI is just, I guess, almost a commonplace in replacing a lot of workers, and everything is just so efficient that we're reaching that utopia that Bitcoiners have envisioned as the Bitcoin future.
I really hope so. But to one of our points earlier, we really need to rewire millions of years of thinking in that, in that absolute reptilian brain that we have. That we need to be of an abundance mindset and realize that, hey, everyone can have anything they want. They just can't have everything they want. And this is to the point we made earlier about, never bet against America. America is fantastic when it's a strong place, and if any country can do it, it is America. There's the greatest entrepreneurs on earth, the greatest capital markets, the ability to create things that we could only dream of. And it's really important, I think, to have a positive, hopeful attitude in what we can achieve moving forward, because the alternative is assuring the result is to be a negative one. Whereas having a hopeful, constructive outlook of what is possible into the future, even if you fall 50% short, it's still an amazing outcome that's significantly better than where we are now. And this is where, um, as as someone who has benefited greatly from our country or my nation state's great relationship with the US, I want the US to be a powerhouse and strong, and I think the world is better for it.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm all for that as well. I mean, I always tell everybody, even though you see in the media that people, rip on Americans and policy like that. I truly believe everybody secretly does love America, and it's just a better place when it does. Maybe that's just the red blooded American in me, but I think. When America is thriving, the world's a great place. So hopefully we start to see that. But with like taking it a step farther, right? I mean, we did have JD Vance and I think it was Besant as well, kind of saying that Bitcoin needs to be a vital part of how the U.S. grows out of this. We
Yeah.
haven't seen them buy any Bitcoin yet. Do you think that we're actually going to do it, or are they going to do this budget neutral way that they've been describing for quite some time? One of my absolute favorite things about Bitcoin is meeting all of you in person. So mark your calendars for February 28th and come down to where I've called home for the past 8 years, Tampa, Florida. The Bitcoin Bay Foundation is putting on this Sound Money Soiree. It's the third annual. It's a night of Bitcoin, poker, an open bar, and a silent auction. All support will go to Bitcoin Bay, a nonprofit that is creating a circular economy down in Tampa Bay, Florida. They're doing absolutely great things, and it's the Bitcoin community that I've called home for such a long time, and these guys are absolutely crushing it. So please do anything you can to support. Buy your tickets today. You can use promo code Green Candle to get 10% off your Sound Money Soiree tickets.
So do you know anything about Bitcoin?
No.
You guys can come down and see this ugly mug. Come boogie on the dance floor, shake it, and now that Bitcoin's over 100K, you can do it all with your girlfriends. All right, enough from me. Let's get back into the show.
No, I think they'll be more overt with it. They're just getting their ducks in a row between now and then. They'll they'll come out and be buying it. I think one thing that may have been happening as well internally within the government, I think there may have been a whole host of government agencies selling their Bitcoin so that they didn't have to hand it over to the Treasury, and they didn't. The Treasury's not asking for US dollars back because they can print whatever they want on that, but they've been asking for the Bitcoin. So, sort of just a side note, that might have been adding to this downward sell pressure that we've seen at this point in time.
So you think it's like maybe the DOJ or the FBI or some one of these entities, instead of keeping the seized Bitcoin, that they've actually sold it off? Is that what you're telling me here, Peter?
Look, if I'm running one of those entities under the government and I get to keep the cash that I've got, or I've got to hand over the Bitcoin, I'm selling it in a heartbeat to keep that within my control. That's just human nature. So that's what they're doing. I've got no doubt that'd be in place. And I haven't seen an executive order or a government mandate saying that any Bitcoin that you've got explicitly cannot be sold, and we want to take control of it. So until I see something like that, I think Occam's razor tells you that the most likely outcome is probably the obvious one. I know what I'd be doing in that situation if my budget depended on it. I'd be selling the Bitcoin immediately, and I'd be keeping control of the cash, because at least you've got the cash, even though you don't have the Bitcoin.
Yeah, that's fair, and I wouldn't doubt it either. I mean, at the end of the day, these governmental entities, they want to keep as much money as they can, whether that's and at the end of the day, the money is the lever to keep control of that power. But with the development of now, we haven't even really talked about the Bitcoin treasury companies and kind of the institutional wave that we saw. Um, you know, Saylor had a nice podcast with Danny not too long ago about these Bitcoin treasury companies. They kind of went at it a little bit, but I think, like, from my perspective, it was a very interesting and eye-opening conversation between the two, because Saylor was saying essentially 2025 was, if you take it at ignoring the price at face value is probably one of the most bullish years in Bitcoin. Obviously, with the price, that wasn't the case. And with the treasury companies, same kind of thing, right? We're having all these businesses pop up and now put Bitcoin on the balance sheet, and majority of them kind of took a big beating, including MSTR. So, with I guess knowing how the success or the rate of success had changed in 25, how do you see institutions looking at Bitcoin, here in 2026?
Look, I think the Bitcoin treasury companies serve a purpose in the market. I think they create some demand for Bitcoin, and the long and short of it is it's a leverage play on Bitcoin. So when Bitcoin's been in a bear market trending down for the last 4 months, those treasury companies have been in a worse position and have come off substantially more. And that's the reflexivity of investing in something that leverages into a highly volatile asset. Um, Ironically, you would have avoided a lot of pain if you just bought Bitcoin and sat on it. But there is, I guess, a flavor of investing for everyone. And what's interesting to me is when it's to the downside, it absolutely crushes performance relative to Bitcoin. But at the same time, when there is a pump in the Bitcoin price, those treasury companies, my expectation is they will outperform Bitcoin moving forward. And what's really interesting to me is as a terminal Bitcoiner, meaning I can't get any more Bitcoin if I tried, that's going to move the needle for me. There's no other assets. It's basically Bitcoin or bust. But what I saw Metaplanet do in December was quite remarkable. With a small price impulse in Bitcoin from 82,000 to 96,000, the MNAV of that company went from 0.86 to 1.26, so it increased 50% in a bit over a month. And they added just under 20% more Bitcoin per share to their shareholders. So if you were holding that one share of Metaplanet, their Bitcoin per share went up by just under 20% in a single month on a very small impulse. So I look at that and think, what that gives me hope on is that the Bitcoin treasury thesis is still sound, meaning that they will be able to accrue more Bitcoin. They'll be able to use market mechanisms to increase their Bitcoin stack and increase their Bitcoin stack per share, which as a terminal Bitcoiner is the most important thing that you can hope for. Because when you're all out of Bitcoin, you can't get any more Bitcoin because you don't have the ability to do it. Having an investment structure that has the ability in good times to add significant amounts of Bitcoin per share, I think will become a very valuable tool. And so, although it's been on the wrong slope for the last, call it 6 or 7 months, when that worm turns, we come out of the bear market into a bull market. I expect those stocks to perform very well, much to the chagrin of the broader market.
How do you think that the thesis? Do you think the thesis is going to change, if any? Like, are they going to try to? I guess like Jack Mallers has brought up buying other companies. Do you think that's going to be the next wave, where because essentially it was just a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies basically like making an announcement that they made one Bitcoin buy, and then they've all kind of stopped. And then we've also seen Saylor put cash on the balance sheet to ride some of this volatility. So how do you see? Do you see it, I guess, the thesis changing slightly here because of what we experienced last year?
I don't think the underlying thesis will change. I think their mission is to get as much Bitcoin as possible. That won't change, but I think we will drift in and out of narratives as to how they achieve that end. So, when we first watched this, we looked at Saylor leveraging his treasury to buy Bitcoin. Then he figured out, I'll use Silvergate to borrow 230 million to leverage my Bitcoin to buy more Bitcoin. Then he figured out, hang on a second, there's a convertible note here. I'd like to use convertible notes because there's a lot less liquidation risk with that. And then he used that. And then he figured out the at the market option, the ATM, for him to issue shares. Then he's moved into the preferreds. I think this is an evolution. They're just going to figure out ways and means to extract capital from the broader market to go and buy Bitcoin with it. And the fundamental thesis hasn't changed, but the mechanisms in which they do that has completely changed. And this is where, when that worm turns, I'm very excited to see how these preference shares work and add to the Bitcoin per share without diluting the shareholders. Because I think it'll add a huge or a significant amount of Bitcoin per share which is huge value add to the shareholders without diluting the shareholders by issuing more shares. So that to me is a killer product in an upbeat market, will be a huge driver for them.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, we've seen Saylor have, what was it, like 4 of the top 10 biggest IPO moments ever with all the preferred offerings that he's brought out. So, I mean, at this point, I mean, can the guy keep doing it? Can he keep raising money to buy Bitcoin? Why are we giving this man so much capital to keep buying Bitcoin, especially with as down as sentiment is? I mean, reverting back to that. Like, he had his 3rd biggest buy ever, like, not too long ago. So,
Yeah.
I mean, who the hell's lending this guy money, Peter?
I think he's the best Bitcoin salesman that we have, and he would be very convincing if you were sitting on a pile of cash to give it to him to go buy some Bitcoin. So I love seeing his success. I think he's a huge net benefit for the Bitcoin community. We're all better for him being in there and him being so open and sharing his ideas with us, because I think it makes all of us that much better for it. But it is hard to believe that he is still the only major player out there of significant size doing this, and there is no competition for him. So I don't know how he keeps doing it, but it's fun to see him on the mission, and I'm thrilled he's on our team.
Exactly. Well, Peter, I'm thrilled you're on our team as well, man. So why don't you tell people what you got going on, and where they can find out more about you and listen to more of your stuff.
Thank you, mate. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on. If anyone wants further information on what we do, you can reach me at thebitcoinadvisor.com, and that's advisor with an ER. What we do is we help people self-custody their Bitcoin. We talk our clients off the ledge, and it's funny, we're having this conversation today because my phone is lighting up talking to clients and effectively discussing, look, it's never as bad as you think it is. But we literally deliver that service to make sure that if you're buying Bitcoin, you do it in the right way, you self-custody it in a way that you can't lose it. And we provide a framework and a service around a whole host of professionals who ensure that if something happens to you as the Bitcoiner, your family will inherit your Bitcoin without any fear or favour. And that's fundamentally my mission in life, is to help get every Bitcoin off exchange. That will ultimately be very self-serving, because that'll push the price up dramatically. But our job here is to help people self-custody, and turns out it's a lot of fun talking to Bitcoiners and helping out with that. So if you want to reach us there, or on Twitter at Peter BTC Advisor.
Yeah, you guys do great work. So I'll be sure to put all that in the show notes. And Peter, thanks so much, brother.
Legend. Thank you, mate.
Thank you guys all for tuning into another great episode of the State of Bitcoin podcast. If you found some value in this one, please hit that subscribe button and that like button to help send this one to the masses. And I've got a surprise for you guys. I've got 2 more episodes that you have the chance to watch here. So go ahead and click one of them, and I'll see you guys all at the next one.